Thank you, Cayla, for reminding me. We are recording this meeting for the ones that were not able to attend today. Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Andrew Campbell. Andrew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Campbell. I teach collaborative piano at Arizona State University. I've been here since 2002, so almost 20 years. And they twisted my arm and convinced me to also be assistant director for graduate studies. So that's another part of my job. We have about 350 graduate students here. So I help them achieve success as graduate students. So, welcome. Great to see everyone.
Thank you so much. So first, before we go on into technicalities, how are you doing? How are you dealing with this pandemic? How do you feel? What's going on in your minds and hearts right now? How are you emotionally?
Do you want the real answer?
Please.
I am such a glass half full guy. I'm in everyone's corner, and I'm the cheerleader. I have never experienced fatigue at the end of a day or at the end of a week like I have now.
Yeah.
I am empty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it today because, like I said, I feel like I'm I try to always be in a positive place and speak with productivity in mind, and every now and then something negative will come out of my mouth. But in this current environment, I feel like anything negative I say will be so toxic that I don't say it, and I realized at some point that I need space to vent. It's why I get up at 5 o'clock and exercise, so I can throw weights around. But that's I tell you, fatigue is real, and it's deeper than I've ever felt. Yeah.
Thank you, Byron.
Yeah.
Cayla, Andrew.
I'll just jump in on what Byron said. One of the things that you mentioned, Byron, that I really feel, and my guess is other people feel this also, is the idea that as faculty, we need to be more of a cheerleader than ever before, more encouraging for our students and positive than we ever have before. And that's great. That's part of our gig. And I love the energy that I get back from the students, but it is true that there is an exhaustion factor, I think, that creeps into that. I'm also not saying anything that's unusual. A lot of screen time is, of course, much more exhausting. So I try to find ways to get away from the screen. One thing I've started to do, which I didn't used to do in the past, at 7 o'clock at night, I close the computer and turn off the phone, and that's that for the rest of the night. I've never done that before in my life because I'm always worried, oh, what about those emails that are pouring in as part of my assistant director job? But those emails, they'll be there in the morning. I can deal with them the next morning. So I think probably we've all underestimated the extra screen time, what that does for us. And so getting away from the screen is I find super helpful. We also, I don't know why we did this, we got a puppy over the summer. So that's been really fun and exciting and challenging and very different, and gets me out running around chasing the puppy around. So that's helped a lot too.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, it's made a big difference, I think, for everyone in their own way to find some sort of method of returning back to an energy level that is appropriate for day-to-day activities. Now, that's a mental, emotional energy level that most of the times, kind of during standard circumstances or during our normal human interactions, we don't feel the drain from that quite as much. So I don't think as individuals, any of us really ever get that close to, like Byron was saying, completely empty. We know what it feels like to be a little bit drained or just to feel the gauge going down, but it doesn't, the light doesn't come on during normal times. And now the light is on at the end of every day. And that's the process of refilling is, I think, looks different for different people. And I'm finding, especially with students, and as I'm trying to get to know new students and new colleagues, which is a very different way of trying to read a room, helping the people that don't know what works for them figure out something that might, because I think there's a very high percentage of the population that, because we've never had to do that, really, they actually don't know what to do. So that's been an interesting process to go through, both individually and with, with new people in my life.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm holding on to those really great teaching moments that happen, the aha moments with students. I feel like they're feeding me in a way that, or I guess I'm appreciating them even more acutely when they happen, because I know that, yeah, for those reasons, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And by the way, anybody in this group, to request, if you feel compelled to do so, we want to see your face. This is an important, in ways of connecting also and create community. This is an opportunity for us to do that. So if you feel compelled to do so, turn your video on. It's going to be a conversation. So if you feel like intervening and, adding to the conversation, asking questions, you have the option to just unmuting yourself or using the chat. We're going to be also using the chat a lot for resources or anything that you want to add to the conversation too. Please do so. So one of the questions that I have in my mind all the time is this big departure from being around your students and having this connection in person, not only the energy, but also the visual. To me, it's very difficult to see where the fingers are of my bassoonist, to test that reed, virtually. How are you dealing with that lack of presence of your students in your studio in front of you? What ways have you found to replace, if possible, that lack of human presence in front of you in real life?
Are you talking literal ways of replicating experiences, like in a lesson context, or developing a community and a relationship?
I think within the lesson, but it's okay to talk about community as well, although I'm planning to ask that question later as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but within the lesson, yeah.
I'm finding a much greater role of humor in the virtual lesson, the diffusing any sort of frustration with technology issues that are going to happen, even with ideal setups. The emotional arousal level of everyone goes down pretty drastically if you can have a good laugh at it when possible. But one of the things from just that I'm finding as an actual advantage from this that I would keep if I could alternate, moving forward, if this were not out of sheer necessity, is the ability to actually be very physically close visually to a student to see what's happening. So I mentioned humor first because oftentimes this goes hand in hand with, if you don't have an elaborate boom set up to have multiple cameras pointed at everything you could possibly want them pointed at. In my bassoon lessons, that often looks like, can you stand up and walk over here and show me what you're doing? And they'll stand up out of their chair and come up and that's the view that I get of an embouchure, or that's the view that, show me what you're doing with the first finger, the half hole on that note G, and they'll stand up and kind of lean the camera down and walk over, and it's not the same as executing it in a performance. Obviously your body's kind of contorted and everything's a little bit funnier, but I think just the act of having to get out of a position enables you to be more aware of how your body's moving. I'm finding with students that they're, that they are actually thinking about what am I doing with the fingers? If I have to take that extra tiny little bit of effort to stand up and lean over to my computer, then it engages the mind a little bit more. And I never in a million years would get that close to a student's mouth. So at least you get a nice up close view of some things that you otherwise would not see, for sure.
Thank you, Cayla. And Byron, I imagine this is difficult, even more difficult for voice students.
So, I think back to, it was March 16th when we were thrown into this. And like that first week was like triage. I just thought, let me not just completely fall apart. Let me just keep let's keep the train going. But then I realized that, kind of like what Cayla said, I realized that I could rely on other skills. And so I started being much more present to, I started talking about jaw and articulators in ways that sometimes I don't focus in on when I'm looking at the whole person in front of me. So yeah, I said, okay, this is an opportunity it's different teaching and it's different learning, but the thing that I found challenging this year was students that were new to me this fall. My returning students, I know what they'd sound like in my room. So I've been taking people outside and to where we can do some work with alignment and with body and breathing and with some exercise. Like if you do a vocal occlusion and it's not, we're not doing open sound or lip trills or anything that sprays. But if we're outside and a good 15, 20 feet apart, we take off our masks and at least we can get a sense of who each other is physically. So that's been really helpful. We have kids on campus. We have a high flex model. So we've got some face-to-face. We've got some classes that are a combination of remote attendance and people in the room. But for lessons, it was a real, a sense of loss. Like I felt like I was losing something. Like my grasp, like the atmosphere I like to create in my studio and the dialogue I like to have with my students. And so I was kind of stuck there until I said, well, there are other skills, there are other tools that we can use. And part of the dialogue now in lessons is, let's check our sound settings. Can you move away from that giant light that's above your head? Like we're other things that we're talking about. And so I guess, my original thing was der heilige Kunst, like I'm losing this thing that I do. But when I switched over and said, it can look different and I'm still teaching things and they're still learning things. But going outside has been helpful, but I think mostly my mindset of we're all afraid of losing something. It doesn't matter where in this industry you are. If you're an arts producer, if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, So once I sort of shook myself away from that, I found that, like Cayla said, there were opportunities to like really zoom in on some things. And I like to go and touch my students. I'll say, I'm going to put my hand in your lower back. I want you to breathe into my hand. So I can't do that. I can have them put their own hands in their lower back. So it just made me more nimble, I think.
You touch on something really cool, which is identity, right? How we're losing our identity in this process as well, and how to still feel that we're doing the right thing and are true to, our trajectory and the things that we're supposed to do even under the circumstances. Thank you. And Andrew, your set of circumstances are completely different, not only as teaching piano, but also as taking care of all the collaborative pianists. How are you dealing with that?
I was going to echo a couple of things that Cayla and Byron said about, the initial shock of dealing with this, and now looking at it from a different perspective of teaching and learning in a new way that is actually exciting and is different, but we can focus on different things. What I've noticed for my students, because they're all collaborative pianists, is we of course are not doing as much collaboration as we have in the past, but what that means is my students get to practice singing and playing, which is what collaborative pianists should do all the time. And so some of them have been very sad that they don't have their vocal colleagues there, because I'll say in the lesson, guess what? Now you get to sing Dich du Liebe. Go for it. Let's hear what you can bring to that. And it's an incredible skill for collaborative pianists to practice. And now they're being forced to practice it all the time because they just don't have the resource of their wonderful vocal colleagues. The other thing that I've done that I'm sure many of you have experienced this is I have found when we were teaching remotely, it was much more effective for the students to send me recordings, and then I would listen to those recordings, and then the lesson would be going over those recordings with the students. Occasionally this would take more time, but I have to say when the students know that they're submitting a recording to me, knowing that I can play it back 100 times, the level was oftentimes a little higher. And knowing that I could play it back many times, when I would hear something and think, or maybe see something technically, I could rewind it and say, okay, what happened there? Let me listen to that closely. Whereas when it happens in real time, I'm sure all of us have had this experience where a student is performing, you're trying to take notes down to give them comments, and it goes by so fast, maybe you only get about a third down what you want to talk about. So using that recording, now I could really analyze it and really go into incredible depth. And then the lesson, whether it's Zoom or FaceTime, or occasionally we have a different modality here in person, we can kind of go over those comments based on that recording. So I've found that my students recording themselves and me listening to recording is a different way of teaching, but I've been able to go into more detail at times. So that's been exciting. But what's happening right now at ASU is similar to what Byron was talking about. We have a hybrid model. We're doing some in-person, some remote. And Leah, I don't know if you want me to, we'll go on to something else right now, or want me to talk about collaboration, how that's happening.
That would be a good segue to talk about collaboration and how are you managing that? That would be great.
So what's happening at ASU is all voice lessons are virtual. Voice teachers are not on campus. They're teaching virtually. Singers are allowed on campus, and collaborative pianists, so other instrumentalists are on campus for lessons if they and the teacher agree to that. So it's very voluntary. If someone wants to be on campus teaching, if someone wants to be on campus for the lesson, that is allowed. We have incredible protocol, which I won't go into. Everyone's in masks, cleaning all the time. If people want to see my crazy setup in my studio, you can see my piano is behind a shower curtain there. I have a air purifier. Everyone is 6 feet apart, all that stuff. But in terms of collaboration with singers, I think is the trickiest part, because much of that is virtual. So what my students are doing, and this is probably true in most places, is they're making recordings for their vocal colleagues. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it's what we have right now. There are some online services. I've found the online services, there are two types. One is sort of run by the pianist. There's a wonderful service called Opera Tracks that has some very experienced professional vocal coaches and wonderful pianists making recordings there, but they get to determine the tempo and the timing. They might be professionals, but they're determining it. The other is an app called Accompanist. Some of you might have heard of this. And for that, it's a recording that then the singer or the voice teacher can manipulate. So again, in that situation, the singer is the one determining all the collaboration. So none of that is what happens in the real world, as we all know, which is the give and take back and forth between singer and pianist in this context. And so what I've encouraged my students to do, my collaborative students, is to work with their vocal colleagues, whether it be virtually through Zoom or FaceTime or on the phone. Recordings go back and forth over many, many stages. Sometimes the singer will sing by themselves and then the pianist will make a first take of the recording and send it back. Sometimes the singer will say, here's one of my favorite recordings. I'm using it kind of as a guide, or my voice teacher has recommended this. But basically the idea that I communicate to my collaborative pianists is you're not going to make one recording and be done. It's going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that is the collaborative rehearsal process. It's just in a very different way. You're not in the same room together, but you're exchanging ideas, which of course you can do via Zoom. Oh, Sally, I need a little more time here. Or, oh, Fred, you're rushing here. Can we take make sure we're very rhythmic there? Some of this can be done via Zoom, but we all know synchronous via Zoom has some tricky aspects. So what I have encouraged my students is to not get frustrated with the back and forth of the recordings, but to understand that it is the new version of what we do all the time, which is in the rehearsal, you go back and forth, you chat about tempo, you chat about interpretation. And now we're just doing that in an online format. I have to say my students then end up making a recording of the same aria, sometimes 10 times. That's good for them. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because every singer sings Un Bel Dia a little differently. So they might as well make 10 recordings of it to have in their back pocket for future use. So I don't want to dominate the conversation, Leah, but that's in a nutshell what we're doing. I'm happy to have further comments or to take questions also.
Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, sorry. I'm finding really similar things if you think about collaborative music, in the sense not just kind of a soloist with a collaborative pianist, but a large portion of what I'm working on right now and what my responsibilities are is chamber music coaching and what that looks like in a virtual environment. And one of the most valuable things that's coming out of that is really a requirement that the students understand at the score level who is in charge of what. So where's the sense of the motor? Where's this, who actually has the melody? Who's, if we were going to layer this together for one of those split screen performances and have different sections recorded at different times and edited things together, who should lay down their track first? You know, who's in charge of the pacing, and then what's the next most informative thing once we have the initial track laid down for, you know, rhythm? Do we need harmonic context next? Do we need melody, because that's going to dictate how everybody else shapes their accompaniment to, you know, just to serve the same musical purpose? And even regardless of what your philosophy is of what order those should come in, just having students engage in that conversation and then make those decisions and record something 3 or 4 times. We've got a quartet and we're going to record it, you know, from the bottom up and then once from the top down, and have those be the order of our reference tracks. How does that change your experience as a collaborative musician? And how does that change the final product if you have different people who are able to control different aspects of the performance in a given order? And even just, you know, almost halfway through the semester, you know, that's been some of the biggest successes, I think, from something that seems like it should be impossible to do, you know, collaborative playing with multiple players over an extremely latency-ridden internet connection.
That's right. Thank you, Cayla. Byron, you want to add anything too?
Yeah, I've as my students and our pianists exchange tracks back and forth, I say, look, I've already done this professionally like since March. I've got more digital work already. Like, so this is, you have to be able to do this. And you have to be able to have a level of consistency with what you do that is actually a good thing. I said, we're not machines, but right now I think having a way to deliver a song or aria that is pretty consistent. I mean, that's what you need when you walk into an audition room. It sort of needs to be living in your body in a pretty stable, consistent way. Not like an automaton, but no, I think they're embracing it.
Something, as we were I was preparing for this encounter with you all. Byron and I were talking about the experience of body language through Zoom. Can you speak of that a little bit? It was very enlightening to me.
What did I say?
You said how the communication and the way the angles, the cameras were pointing to the pianist, and how the pianist will indicate things that will do in real life, in video format, when accompanying you.
Oh, yeah. So the coach I work with, prepares accompaniment videos rather than soundtracks, so that I see his hands on the keyboard, I see his gesture, especially if it's really, you know, something like John Adams, or if it's something with lots of cadenzas, if it's bel canto with cadenzas and such. It helps to have the visual. So that's been otherwise it is hard to. I've also suggested, if something starts with a voice, like just put the ritornello before the first entrance. Like, so let's arrange things so for success. Especially a younger singer doesn't have the same ownership of that, and you can't, you know, breathe and then hold your breath until you hear the piano. So it's, you know, it's skill building. Sometimes you wish you were doing things in a different order. It's somewhat dictated to us by the current situation, but it's still, there are ways to structure this so that the students are still learning how to be collaborative partners. I've got a situation in my songlit class where the students have to sing, prepare art songs for their final, but then I've got my piano colleague who is teaching students in the accompanying has for accompanying lessons. So we're trying to line up experiences. So if I can get students and singers and pianists paired, it could serve the pianist for the pianist jury and the students final, and maybe the singer's jury as well. So it starts to sort of add, it ups the ante of the experience a little bit. And they also know that it will be useful in more than one situation. In our current opera production, we're calling it a project. I'm not using words like production and concert because they make us think back to what we used to do. So we're really talking about things that are project-based. So our fall opera project is 12 singers in the ensemble, and they are all working on arias and monologues, both Shakespeare and contemporary. And so by the end of it, they will have a a really good video of an aria that has been thoroughly worked through with a director and that they could use for a summer program, for a grad school application, for anything. So we're trying to look at it that way. That's your sort of your archive is more than just, I don't want to say just a performance, but it's something that can serve more than one purpose. Sorry, I kind of digressed a little bit, but
I want to jump on something that Byron said. This idea of the visual aspect is so crucial, and actually, Opera Tracks, this professional website, they're all videos, and some of my students are starting to experiment with that for their vocal colleagues, not making audio recordings, but video recordings for exactly what Byron talks about, the idea of the singer needs to see the pianist's hands. Sometimes there are cadenzas or things that he mentioned. It takes a little more effort for the video. Of course, it takes more bandwidth, and the file sizes are larger when you're sharing them with your colleagues. But when they play them off of their computer screen or off of their iPhone, it is so much richer that they can actually have this sort of visual connection. And I think that's been the frustration with the initial recordings, is exactly what Byron's talking about. You're a singer, you're waiting there, and suddenly the music starts. Like how can you be cued in or even figure out when to begin if there's no introduction. So using the fact that we can easily, and anyone with an iPhone or a basic setup can make a video recording that has pretty good sound quality. Again, I have found that's been more helpful, and some of my students are starting to embrace that model.
Thank you, Andrew. And speaking of that, what technology are you using for teaching, and what technology are you requiring, if possible, from students? We know that may be, it'd be difficult for some students to acquire equipment, and also for faculty. So I would like to hear how have you managed this issue?
I'll jump in there from an applied lesson standing. We're fortunate enough to have some resources at the school to help provide some external USB microphones, the little kind of meteor, the ones that look like a little rocket ship. They're about $50, and that's been really a game changer for students that are either really on anything. Right? I've yet to really find a great internal microphone on a laptop or a phone or a tablet that's a high enough quality to be able to address something over a long term, over a full semester of lessons or a summer of development or something like that. I do have students that tune into I just had one this morning that signed into the lesson with just a phone sitting on the back of a piano, and we just have to kind of address what you can. And I think we all with our highly trained ears, learn very quickly what is a technology issue and what is a user error, so to speak, in terms of how students are producing sounds, or how collaboration is happening. But I can actually, I'll pull up and drop in the chat function here a handout that I made of microphones and explaining. I designed this after we did a whole series. A colleague of mine done it, UT Arlington. I did a series on technology and Zoom lessons, and we really got into the weeds with some of it. But one of the things that I run into pretty frequently when we have this discussion, and ran into it immediately back in March, is the idea of accessibility and equity of experience. When we have students that just don't have access to some of the things, you can have really lifelike, latency-free lessons and rehearsals if you had unlimited funds and the best internet, and you could pay for everything. If you have the money for it and you have the access to it, then you could pay for an experience that's just like real life. But I don't think that our students or us as teachers have the access to that, and B, that it should be required in order for us to give a quality musical and learning experience to students. So the handout that I dropped in there is kind of the basic, almost like price designed. It's explaining what all of these microphones are, what is an interface, all the terms that we started hearing thrown around, or at least I did in April. I thought, gosh, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what all these do. I don't know anything about this. And immediately I felt like I was a million years old because it's something that I should know about and don't have the technology awareness for it. But from like a price point at about, I usually tell students that, yeah, I assume that you have a pair of earbuds that you can plug into something um, for about $50. You can make do with getting the microphone set up and assuming you have something to, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a laptop or a desktop, something that you can connect to an internet, then everything else can be navigated with free software. And so that's a lot of what's kind of linked in there. And I have a number of resources. I really spent quite a lot of time diving into how to make this happen and I don't feel like it's fair to ask extreme financial investment in something that we're hoping is not a permanent thing, and that some just don't have access to. So I could go on forever about that, but I did have a number of really involved discussions with students at the beginning of the year that were, well, why don't we just use this? And it would be, you know, the University of wherever is doing this, and they've got subscriptions to this, and well, we don't we can't ask everyone to pay that. And we can't ask everyone to invest also their time and energy in the immense amount of time and energy from an institutional or from a faculty standpoint to become an expert in something that we're not experts in. So how can we do something that's really quality that it won't break the bank, both in terms of the actual financial bank or your emotional bank if it's leading to you pulling your hair out trying to figure out how to plug in GarageBand or something to make latency go away. You know, like Byron was saying earlier, there are different tools, and I think a lot of times our energy and our finances are better spent learning how to use the tools we already have better rather than being concerned with purchasing new ones.
Thank you, Cayla. Byron, would you like? Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, no, I'll just take a few seconds.
Please.
That was incredibly well said. I don't have too much to add because that's what we're all feeling. I think I can't wait to look at the resources that you put there. The mic is important, and it can be done pretty cheaply. I mean, everyone is on a budget, particularly our students. But between $50 and $100, I've heard from my students and my colleagues that you can get something that's pretty decent. The big issue, of course, is the synchronous teaching, and that depends so much on the blazing fast internet, and we just can't require that of our students. It's just not possible. And so that's why many of us have gone to the model, if we have students who don't have good internet, of you send me a recording and then we'll discuss that over a Zoom call or a FaceTime call, depending on their technology. I just find that reduced a lot of the frustrations that was happening in April and early May. So in any case, but thank you for sharing all those resources. I can't wait to look at them.
My highlight was teaching a lesson to a kid who was in his car outside of a Bojangles getting their Wi-Fi on his phone. And I said, you know what? We're just going to have to make this work. When everybody had to leave the dorms, and he was in very rural North Carolina, no internet at the home, only cell service, and that was not great. So he had about a 20-minute drive to a larger town, and we just made it work. I don't know how anyone else is feeling. I came to the realization that with a colleague here, we were talking. He said, "You know, I think we might be teaching less, and I think that needs to be okay. So if I think I get through a certain amount of rep over a semester or a certain amount of lit in my songlit class, I had to just step back and say, I need to. I've been thinking for a while." Do less better and do fewer things more deeply. But I think I've had to come to the place where, how can I not do Mahler in my songlit class? I think I would have to just, end it. But I have to I have to be okay with teaching less as long as I feel like I'm teaching well. And that was a good shift for me mentally, because otherwise I was worrying about the things I wasn't covering. And I know that my singers will be further along technically at the end of this semester, and they will know more rep. Um, Maybe we would have gotten more done had we been in person. I'm not sure. I'm finding that my students are taking more ownership of their technical progress, since I'm not in the room sort of, I'll say, policing it. So it's me giving up. It's me trusting them more. It's me giving up some of my, stop doing that with your tongue, and letting them be in the driver's seat more. But I think allowing myself to teach less stuff, less material, that was liberating.
I think a lot of times when we have that false parallel between progress and product, or process goal and a product oriented goal, if we're so fixated on having something to show, or the sheer volume of things that we can show at the end of a semester or the end of a year, and that's really, deep in our hearts what we have placed the highest premium on, then that was the first thing to go, just by default, when all of this kind of virtual, when we all became required to do something virtually. We were just talking about this right before this started, that I think one of the blessings to come out of this is us actually being able to have these realizations as teachers and as students, that there are things that I can achieve things in a different manner than I thought possible, and I now have, walking out of this hopefully on the other side, not in too distant of a future, we now can use all of the tools that we're using virtually in addition to all of the ones we were used to using, and we're defining success in different ways. And there are still some careers and some students and some educational paths that will define success the way that we're used to. Do you know enough Mahler? And then and then I think there are more and more as our field is diversifying, that will prioritize other things, that we're a little behind the ball right now as educators in the field to, we're playing catch up to some of the careers that our students will have and some of the paths that they want to go in. And I think this can be a very good thing for us. Doesn't feel great in the moment, but it's certainly good.
Thank you for the positive outlook. Absolutely. So speaking of technology a little bit more deeper, I know you are using Zoom. Are there any Zoom features that you are using that you have discovered in the process to enhance your lesson experience? We are mostly using Zoom at the University of Arkansas.
You use original sound.
Yeah, and there was a Zoom update recently. So it takes the 20 or 30 seconds to install the Zoom update. It has some enhancements of sound. Yeah,
for sure, the update's good. And then I know some people are using some third-party services like Clean Feed. I don't know if people have had success with that. Basically, the video goes through Zoom, but the sound goes through Clean Feed. It's free. Both people have to have it, meaning the student and the faculty person has to have it. I haven't personally used it because I am actually able to teach mostly in person, but I know some of my colleagues are using it, and they say very good things about that as well. The other thing I think that we've all been using on Zoom that's really very cool is sharing screen. I've done that with students when we're looking at scores after they've played. Also, when you play back through Zoom, of course, make sure you're sharing computer sound, playing a video. We've all made that mistake to have the sound just floating through the air and it sounds terrible. But if you share your computer sound directly through the Zoom feed, that of course works great. But I teach some small seminar classes, things like Songlit, and when people are spread out, I used to get a big like TV and put things up there, and now I can share everything to everyone's laptop wherever they're sitting, because they're sitting in our hall and they're spread 6 and 12 feet apart. And so I find the screen sharing service of Zoom to be pretty slick and very helpful.
Thank you, Andrew and Cayla, for the handout, and Byron. I'm saving those. I'm going to send a follow-up email with these resources as well, and along with the recording for you to have it. How are you creating community in your studios? Back to the question from before, and as you respond, I'm going to open the floor for other questions. So if you feel compelled to do so, again, after this, unmute yourself or add your question to the chat.
Community. Oh, sorry, Byron, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm still having studio classes, virtual studio classes, but I'm trying to. We sort of did a buddy system with especially our undergraduate voice majors. So we were linking incoming freshmen with maybe sophomores and juniors to try and create some, just to try to connect them as humans before they got here. So I do. So it is happening. It's not in the way we would have envisioned, but we're still fostering, this community by sometimes it's shared projects or in studio classes or large seminar classes where all the majors are together. But they're more. I'm old, and they're used to online community. They're used to feeling a sense of community with technology. So I had to sort of step back and say, they've still got this. Yeah. Speaking as the old guy.
No, I was going to say that community was at the forefront of my mind, and anticipation of some major struggles coming into a new position with a new studio with some new students and in a new department to me. And the students, like you were saying, they already know how to do that. So I mean, I am using social media quite a bit with the studio. So we've got Instagram and Facebook pages. All the kids these days aren't on Facebook, so that's mainly our like advertising, advertising events mechanism. But the studio Instagram page is the place that blows up with the photoshopped. They Photoshop, somebody misses a studio picture and somebody else takes it upon themselves to Photoshop a weird little cutout of somebody else into the studio picture. And we now have a mascot and there are inside jokes I don't understand. And it's probably pretty close to just reeling out of control in that sense from my studio, but they're all very kind and I'm not concerned about it. They know what to do. So a lot of this has just been me making sure that I'm not getting in the way of that, trying to force something that I think would work for me when they in a lot of ways have things that work for them. But on a day-to-day basis, I've found great success in increasing the amount of language I use in individual lessons that references somebody else's struggles or successes or developments. So a number of things like, oh, I was just talking about this with Kyle this morning, and that way they have, some of them follow up on it, some of them just know that it exists, that even though I'm not seeing them every day, there's this other human out there. His name is John. I think I remember what he looks like. He's also working on this. And so knowing that there's, that there are other people out there, even if we're not in the same room, I think is helping in a small scale way. But I just let them have their group chat and hope there aren't too many memes about me and just kind of let it happen.
Or hoping that there are.
I want to see all of them.
That's the greatest compliment to have a meme about you. Then you know you've made it.
Yeah.
Frame it and put it in your office.
I'm probably not the best person to talk about the community because we're fortunate at ASU that we're able to be on campus and all the collaborative pianists are choosing to have in-person lessons. But what I've noticed is we're one of the few studios that is doing that. And so I've never appreciated community more than I do right now. And I've had a couple of my students say to me, Dr. Campbell, this collaborative piano studio class is the only time I'm in a room with other human beings where we're talking about music or where we're making music. We just had studio class today. I'm trying not to get choked up here. But I think it's really important. We know that we're going to open up. Maybe some of us, ASU is a little more open than other areas of the country, but we know it's going to happen at some point. And it's so incredibly precious, this idea of being together, and I will never take it for granted. So finding little ways to do it, as my colleagues were saying, right now when it's virtual, we have one student who's virtual, so we're including her through Zoom in studio class and making sure I point the camera to her and everyone sees her and everyone says hi. That's really.
That's lovely, Andrew.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we all exercise in here compassion, which is at the core of what we do. Sorry, my dogs decided to talk with me. But yes, compassion. Questions from people attending this beautiful conversation. Comments, ideas, experiences. Maybe some of you and our panelists as well want to share some teaching success stories as well. But opening the room for everybody. Ciao.
Just, I've got 4 students who, this is their recital semester, and we've, you know, anything that they thought they were going to do for their recital is defunct. We're doing it by YouTube, so they're going to put together a YouTube video. Obviously, they won't play it all at the same time. They'll probably make recordings on 4 separate days, 5 separate days. Hard to do anything collaborative. Any thoughts on that? Any ideas?
We, like you, we're being incredibly flexible with our recital requirements. So we have a lot of students who are doing many types of hybrid recitals, things that you've suggested, putting videos on YouTube. Some students are attempting to very successfully to record, you know, multi-track things and splicing those together, piecing those together. That's how old I am. I just said splicing out loud. Of course, none of the younger people on the panel know what I'm talking about. But I think the main thing for us as faculty, and this goes back to what one of my colleagues was saying earlier, we have to kind of rethink what our expectations are in terms of what is a recital, how long is a recital, how much music is on the recital, and how does that look? So the idea of playing, you know, 60 minutes in a row without a break, I think is we don't need to worry about that right now. Recording things at different times, packaging them together, then they can exist on YouTube, and people, if they're put it on a public channel, if they feel comfortable, my gosh, then many more people are going to see it, and this can lead to all sorts of wonderful things if people are building their own websites or promoting themselves in a career aspect. In a certain sense, can be much more effective than the one recital on stage at your school that exists just for that one moment in time, in a certain sense. So just being creative with recitals, I think, is a great idea.
I am so in agreement. There was we had just redone our curriculum and retooled our senior recital, and we're moving towards, it's called a performance project. And I don't know if any of you caught there was a thing over the summer, a 3-day panel discussion from San Francisco Conservatory, the Center for Innovative Leadership. And they did a thing, they had an awesome panel. They had singers and instrumentalists and conductors and arts managers, and for every walk of every aspect of the profession. And one of the panelists said, our job is not so much to make art as to engage people in the art that we make. So I just sort of let that sort of land. And then so last spring, we had to think of something to do with all these recitals. And so we came up with what's called a personal musicianship project. And so this could be tailored to, it could really be a lot of things, but we were already thinking this idea of coming out and going through, I'm going to sing my Italian set, and then I'm going to walk backstage, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to sing a German set, then I'm going to walk backstage and I'm going to do this. There's this, just because we've done that way for many long time. But now this idea of, can you include, image? Can you include dance? Can you work with a composer colleague? Can you, is there spoken word that would be meaningful? Do you want to so this idea of opening the recital up to an engaging experience kind of helped us bridge this a little bit. And we're also saying maybe we don't need all of the rep that we would have required, because now you're also talking about working with perhaps a dancer. Maybe you're now working with audiovisual, so there's no AV editing involved. But we had already started the conversation about this senior performance project, and it kind of led the way for us. But to be much more flexible about what that looks like. One of my students created a Google site of women composers. She had already designed the recital, but then we couldn't have it. So she decided to make almost a mini lecture recital presentation that was an archive. And yes, she missed the energy that she got from an audience, but she also had something that wasn't just an hour of her life. She could use this, she could submit these recordings, she could share it with family who would never be able to travel. So the idea of flexibility and the idea of I will say, losing my grip on this holy experience of performing a recital, like it helped me, like, because I feel so strongly, I guess we all do, but it helped me to guide them a little bit, and also to sort of and it's not lowering my expectations, it's not lowering our standards. It's actually raising some standards, raising some expectations while keeping the same standard of, technical proficiency and artistic authenticity. I don't know, that's my little sermonette.
I think it's not a lowering of standards, and my big soapbox this past 6 months has been, it's also not a band-aid. That the vast majority of these experiences they're still legitimate educational, artistic experiences that we in many forms of curriculum right now haven't made room for, because we have such traditional models. And those, in many ways, this is one of the things I think it's great, that the great discussion that's coming out of this is, for what types of students is the senior recital the best culminating experience? Is that they need to be doing that? Because there are students that still need that, but there are some that would benefit just as much, if not more so, to create a lecture recital online portfolio and cut their own multi-track digital music portfolio. And those all require, we could design experiences that all require comparable rigor and technical development and musical prowess that just don't look like what we have required them to look like in the past, because we've only thought of music as existing in one way.
That's very profound and beautiful, and also makes me think that we're not only dealing with COVID and confinement, but also racial tension and many conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is all appropriate as well to reconsider how we do what we do, and how we can reach out to our students and really have an impact in their lives and their future.
Yeah, we can and should be asking the same thing with staple repertoire to that end.
Absolutely. And I hear all of you also being innovative in that regard. And I think that for us to guarantee the sustainability of our professions, we need to be thinking about that as well, right? How we're going to present ourselves and our students and our institutions to the future, and stay and have a life after COVID. We are almost out of time, but I am so excited to have had this opportunity to chat with you and to have my colleagues and friends here as well attending. If they want to reach out to you, is that okay to connect? How do they find you? Can you tell us where are you available on the internet world?
You want us to just put it in the chat? Or...
Sure, that'll be fantastic. That'll be fantastic. So I hope we continue in touch. Thank you so much, Cayla, Byron, and Andrew, for your precious time and for the conversation. And to all of you that attended today, thank you so much for your interest and for supporting this initiative. More panels will come our way, so stay tuned to it. And I think we all should, continue this conversation among ourselves. This is really beautiful, and to know it's been a reality to me, not always obvious, that the only way to get stronger is to hold hands together, right? So the more we can talk to others and connect and share information, the stronger we will be as institutions, as musicians all together. So virtual applause if you want to unmute yourself. But thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Great to see
All right,
everyone.
have a wonderful.